This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Tamika Murray. How you doing today?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing great. So you are you are work with people in spiritual awakening and writing as a healing tool is kind of what we're going to be talking about. But in terms of being a life coach, what brought you into this area of type
Oh,
of coaching?
oh goodness. All right. Well, that in and of itself is a story, but to give you the short version, I used to be a social worker several years ago, and I loved what I did. It's just that I felt very drained because I'm very empathetic. I can pick up on people's energy or just energy in general very easily. And I found that it was exhausting and it was literally making me sick, the
Mm-hmm.
toxicity of it. So I ended up transitioning from being a social worker into writing full time. Writing is something that I've always done. I've been writing since I was a child. And, I loved doing that as well. However, back in 2022, I had what I call the acceleration of my spiritual awakening. And I was being heavily guided to go into life coaching. It was something that I had heard about, before. I had an uncle who was very much into Tony Robbins and, just people like him. And I would consider Tony Robbins to be like, I guess, the grandfather of life coaching at this point. He was
Mm-hmm.
really out there doing it when a lot of people had never even really heard of that before. And so, because I was being like guided divinely through signs, synchronicities, I'm very much in touch with spirit. I can hear spirits. And they were just basically leading me and guiding me into, well, doing a lot of things, including moving to Boston. But one of the other things they were trying to do is, guide me out of not only just being a writer and an author, but also to share my gifts of being able to help people heal themselves through being a life coach. So that started in 2022. I actually took two online courses. One was to become a professional life coach, the other one was to become a spiritual life coach. And I found that the courses were very similar to the work that I did as a college student getting my social work degree. So it seemed like a very natural fit. And I haven't regretted it since I've gone into it.
That's awesome. So so what are some of your self-published work is like crying, learning, and laughing why students visit the teen center?
Yes,
That's the book.
I always refer to that book as my baby because that's the first manuscript that I completed because I did actually write a book years ago. I completed it, but I never revised it and I never published it. So this was the first book that I actually completed and self-published, and it went on to win 4 awards, and I'm very, very proud of it. It's chronicling my time as a social worker at a school-based youth services program in southern New Jersey, where I was born and raised. I grew up in
Mhm.
Atlantic City, New Jersey, back in the 80s. It was a very interesting time to be a kid, especially in Atlantic City. And the time that I spent at the teen center at the local high school in Atlantic County, it left a very big impact on me. And I loved the job that I did. I wore a lot of hats when I
Mhm.
did that job. It wasn't just having one on one sessions with students, it was also facilitating groups. I was the liaison for the Baby Think It Over pregnancy prevention group. The kids loved it. I even had a boy join the group, which I was very adamant that the group should have both male and female in it
Mhm.
because, as I used to say to them, if an unexpected pregnancy pops up, it's not just going to be the responsibility of the female. Like the boys need to be in this group
Yeah, they need to
as
be
well.
involved. Yeah.
So, I mean, unfortunately, not as many boys were as open minded to it. It's unfortunate, but the one that did join the group, he was very much into it. He even wore the belly just to see what it was like,
Oh
what it would
yeah,
be like for the girls, to go through it. So that was fun.
that's
But
cool.
yeah, the teen center was great. We offered mental health services as well as help with homework. I used to, along with the other staff there, it was a very small, tight knit staff. It was our program manager as well as our mental health clinician. And we also had interns from Stockton University, which is actually where I went to school down in southern New Jersey. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. You never knew what a day was going to look like because we would have like scheduled events, we would have scheduled sessions with students, but we also took walk-ins and emergencies. And
Hmm.
so it was almost like a little mini soap opera at the teen center. So that's what I based my first book off of. And the reason why that book even came to be is because, again, I got inspiration. I was missing my students. This was early 2020, and it was right before the pandemic hit. I was thinking
Hmm.
about my students a lot. I was at home with my now ex boyfriend. We were living together, and I was working as a freelance writer. And I kept like I don't watch the news very much. I really don't, and I find that it has the tendency to lower your vibration and just keep you in this state of fear and panic. I'm
Hmm.
definitely somebody who likes to stay aware of what's going on in the world, but I also feel like the media has this just designed to basically feed nothing but fear and
Yeah, it's
trauma to
like
people.
crisis after crisis. But it's
Yeah, and
kind of
it's like,
designed put you in this kind of state of like,
yeah.
the wolf's at the door all day.
Exactly, exactly. And I was like, I could kind of see the writing on the wall. I saw that we were heading towards what did turn out to be the pandemic, and my students were heavy on my mind. So, what I initially was going to do is do a blog series about the Teen Center because I was missing them so much.
Mm.
And of course, a lot of the students that I had worked with had already graduated, but every year there's a new, fresh set of students coming into the Teen Center. That's the beauty of it. And so for me, once I get an outline together and I know what I'm going to write about, it doesn't take me long to write a manuscript. It really doesn't. So between the time that I got the idea of making a blog series out of it, and then I got the idea, well, you know what? Instead of making it into a blog series, just do a book. You've always
Mhm.
wanted to be an author, you always wanted to do this. Why not just do it now? And that's exactly what I did. Like I got the outline together, same outline. I just turned it into a book. And the manuscript was written, I would say, in less than 2 months, give or take. And that's only because I took breaks in between. When I, go hard on a writing project, I can get it done in an even shorter amount of time. So between getting the idea in early 2020, I got it written. I got the whole manuscript revised and edited and did all of that. And I had it published by September 1st of 2020.
Or you're
Um,
directed. Like it's
yeah.
good to well, it's good to like I'm a creative person myself, and
Hmm.
sometimes people procrastinate or they get unsure, and it's kind of like you got to trust yourself. I always believe there's like a muse, being a
Hmm.
musician that I can tap into, and you trust what you can do. Like you trust your writing ability. If you're a writer, if you're a poet, you trust your poetic ability. Musicians, we trust our musical ability. But what happens is sometimes we suddenly get a doubt. And if you get that doubt, then it wrecks everything because then you're trying to make things perfect. And what I've always
Hmm.
found is the happy accident ends up being like the best thing, like the extreme of consciousness kind of thing.
Right.
They
Hmm.
like I talk to a lot of writers, and there's like, yeah, I world build, I create the outline, but sometimes I give myself permission to just go off and just go into the stream. And sometimes that stream is so good that like it changes my mind about the direction I was going.
You're absolutely right. And I'm very grateful and very happy with how the book turned out. I ended up going to the Reader's Favorite Book Award ceremony down in Miami in late 2022 and had a great time. It's not just about the ceremony of getting your award. I got an honorable mention and
Mm.
which was fantastic. And I got to really connect and meet all these amazing authors. And I just had a really good time. It was a great experience. And, I look forward to attending more events like that.
But I think
But yeah.
connection is like networking is so important. It's like in the podcast world, like as we
Hmm.
build our Rolodex, we talk to other podcasters, we talk to guests. those guests, talk us up. We get to talk to other people. That's how you get opportunity in the world. Like you got to take that your idea from inside your head, get it out into the world. Like law of attraction, then finds your tribe, finds people around you, and then you got to be willing to kind of show up. If you show up, then things happen.
Do, and you just have to trust. And I got to tell you that trust has played a big part in not only my career, but really my life in general. Definitely. Learning to trust the process and just surrender. Sometimes it's easier said than done. But then again, I've also heard from spirit that it is easy. It's just that humans tend to complicate it and make
And
things
make
more
things harder.
difficult than it
Well,
needs to be.
well,
So,
vulnerability, your secret sauce is like as an artist. What I find is like
mhm,
the more you're willing to kind of go into the looking glass self and ask yourself the hard question, and then actually deal with the answer, and then
yeah,
actually put it out there, right?
mhm,
That's what you got to kind of trust. You're not going to get harmed because everybody's looking for safety. So sometimes
yes.
they keep things in because it's like it's unsafe to tell people I'm vulnerable because then they're going to use it, right? If they use it, then I'm going to get hurt. And so I can't tell people like the real truth about myself because I'm afraid that they're going to use it. So, that's kind of the conundrum.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. And, vulnerability is it's very important. I tend to be very vulnerable with my life story and the things that I've gone through because I feel like you don't really know a person until you know what they've been through.
Hmm.
And some things people want to keep private, and that's completely understandable. But some things I feel like, depending on the situation, you can share your story because you never know. It might inspire someone to take action, to seek help, to make changes, to do the thing that they've been too nervous to do, like writing.
Yeah,
In my field, I've met so many people just telling them, like, oh, I have 11 published books, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, like, how do you have like 11 published books? And I'm like, by writing,
you're right. Yeah, you put
you
it out
know?
there in the world. Well, the thing is,
Yeah.
like if the whole idea is like you pay it forward. Like if you take your lessons learned instead of hiding them, instead of being shameful about feeling shame about it. Like if people like I've talked to so many people who are like addiction specialists, therapists, and they've gone through it themselves, so they
Wow.
can actually tell the story, right? So when you're willing to kind of get past these other the guilt of it, the shame of it, oh, I didn't feel good. It's not my best look. It's not my best face. But if you can tell that story, somebody can find something in it that relates. That's why songwriters like, why do they write about melancholy, sad things? Because that's what connects with people.
It
you know.
does. It does. But I will also say, not to get too much into the music industry and where it is now,
Oh
but
yeah, well that's a whole nother thing.
I will say that just as someone, I grew up, I was born in 81, in December of 81. I'm an almost Christmas baby, 2 days before Christmas. And I grew up in a household with my mother and my maternal grandparents. And I was very blessed to be nurtured in a home where I was able to listen to music from the 50s, the 60s, the 70s,
Hmm.
the 80s, which
Yeah,
the 80s was
great
a
music.
great time for music. And I still listen to a lot of it on my phone today. And I find that, yes, I totally agree that singers should be writing songs that are realistic, that connect with people. But I also feel like music is sorely lacking love these days. There's
I
not
think
as
it's
many
about shock value. I mean, I
yeah,
think
there's not as much
there's a lot of
love in the lyrics or
well, you
soul.
think about Stevie Wonder in songs in the key of life. Like I'm a
Yeah,
child of the '70s, and my dad,
yeah.
he had James Brown, he had Brubeck, he had Davis, he had Coltrane, he had all this in Motown, he had Sun
Hmm.
Records, he had stuff Philly stuff, but the whole idea was you're listening to these soul singers, you're listening to like funkadelic, it's fun, like
Yeah.
it's funk. I mean, there's something about funk is like it just makes you get up and dance, it makes you happy, right? There's
Uh-huh.
something about soul that's impactful, right? And jazz, you listen to Coltrane or Davis, and you're like, or Sun Ra, and you're like, wow, look at that. But like today is like, it seems like a lot of shock value, a lot of
Yes.
just cloning or copying,
Yeah.
sampling. Like, and I'm kind of like Prince used to say, like music real by real
Sampling.
musicians, right? Because there's something about, when you see Stevie Wonder, you're like, he's playing it, he's doing it.
It
And when you just clone and you copy and you're just trying to, hit the algorithm and just be this, are you really feeling it? Do you really feel the
is.
music? Or are you just trying to use it? That's what it feels like to
because
me.
because just like the written word, music in and of itself, the melody has the ability to heal people. Frequencies can heal people, and they can also trigger certain emotions in
Yeah.
people. So that's why I said, like, I love songs. That's the majority of the music that I have on my phone. Like, and I love rock too. I listen to everything. That's the beauty of the childhood that I had. Like, I was allowed to listen to whatever
Everything.
I wanted to,
Very
and it
wide.
didn't matter. Like, I was a
Yeah.
huge Queen fan when I was like 2 or 3 years old,
I was listening to
or
the Carpenters.
yeah. And my mother loved the Carpenters, so I loved the Carpenters, and I was a Bon Jovi fan because I grew up in Jersey, and I mean, I was just that kid that was allowed to listen, like I said, to
Yeah.
anything, and my cousins were the same way. So, it was wonderful having that ability, and I feel like through working with teens, so many of them were like, "I like the music from when you were growing up. Like, I don't
Yeah.
like the music from today." And that was
Yeah.
kind of surprising to me, but then not really, you know what I mean?
But
So,
the industry has kind of fallen off, and it's not
yeah,
really, they're not looking for the next like Jimi Hendrix. They're not looking for the next James Brown or even the next Prince, right? Like it seems like they've gone. It's all called a personality. It's all
mhm,
shock value. It's all like what you can do on TikTok and social media, and it's all this trending stuff. But people forgot. There's like, people used to have to like Motown had a school and they
yes, they
taught
did.
people how to be artists. They taught
Uh-huh,
people how to dress. They taught people how to present themselves. They taught them etiquette. They taught them all this stuff. Like, so if you go back in the day, like people, they put people through, James Brown used to find people they didn't hit the right note. I mean, there's this discipline, right? There's like
yes,
learning your craft, putting the time in, like like a Mississippi Delta blues guy, like putting that time in to
and just
actually putting the work in. Is like, yeah, that I am the blues because I live the blues night, and things happen to me, and now I'm telling you the story.
same with the Jacksons. I grew up with a mother who loved Michael Jackson. Hence, I grew up loving Michael Jackson because he was larger than life back in the 80s.
Yeah,
Like,
he's big.
seriously, he was. And I mean, I think I used to drive the teens crazy, like showing them all this footage of Michael Jackson from the 80s. Like, I used to show them like the Grammy Awards, Captain EO, and
Yeah, all
Moonwalker.
the
And they'd be
great,
like,
all the
I've never
stuff.
seen this stuff before. And they were like, well, that's because when I was a kid, they would have like Michael Jackson Weekend on MTV and VH1 and BET, and like I was like, he was everywhere. Like, you
He was on
couldn't.
all the variety shows. He's
Yeah.
showing up on Michael
So
Douglas. He's showing up on everything.
yeah, so I'm just like, and they love his music too. They really do. It's just they had no idea because so much has happened since then. They had no idea just how prominent he was, like everywhere on
Cartoon. I mean, I was
TV.
watching the cartoon.
Yeah,
But yeah,
exactly.
that kind of dates me. Like, he's out there with Fat Albert and all that stuff.
Oh,
But
Fat Albert. I love Fat Albert. I
but
do.
yeah, frequency is very important. Like, I'm a synthesis. Like, so what that means is like I use synthesizers and I actually play them like keyboards, but they
Okay.
take like sound waves, like
Hmm.
square waves, triangle waves, cosine waves, all kind of ramp waves, pulse waves, and I create the tone before I even write the song. And one thing I learned as a musician is like frequencies and patterns and rhythms.
Hmm.
And when I play live, I can get a reaction from the crowd based on whatever frequency or thing I tap into. So if I do something that's very harmonious,
Hmm.
people will put out their candles or like put the phones on and they're like swaying
Uh-huh.
back and forth, right? So that's very harmonious. If you do something discordant like punk rock or really hard rock, it get people kind of rallied up. So you can kind of trigger like your the outcome. You can get
Mhm.
immediate reaction to your work, to your art in real
Exactly.
time, which is fantastic if you realize what you can do with it.
And I just, I know we kind of like lost the trail a little bit because we were supposed to be like talking about like writing as a spiritual for your spiritual awakening. But I will say that writing and music, they tend to go hand in hand, at least for me, because when I was going through the process of writing the book about the teen center, I would sometimes listen to certain songs and they would trigger memories in me like instantly. And music has a way of doing that for people, especially depending on what the situation was and why you have that memory attached to that particular song. So yeah, that was very, very helpful for me when I was writing the manuscript. I would listen to certain songs um, that I used to listen to like inside of the teen center because we would let the teens like watch videos all the time and listen to
Mhm.
music. So yeah, I mean not all the time, but for the most part they had access to the TV and the streaming apps. So
But frequency is real important when you're like, getting into like the spiritual world, like
oh,
the vibes in
very
your life.
much
Like,
so.
so like, what I try to connect is like the music is not disconnected from other things in life because like that frequency that you can tap into that brings in that vision. Like if you
Hmm.
remember you're writing your book and then you're listening to some song because that song puts this that frequency puts this image in your mind. It's like a sound. You're actually seeing like a movie in your mind, and
Exactly.
how you interpret it is different than how other people interpret it, and it connects you to this like universal key. Like right, so you run into these universal concepts that get triggered by these frequencies, and that's kind of like in the spiritual world. There's all these frequencies there that you can pull in, some that you can hear, some that you can't. They just come in and you feel them, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So when you're having a spiritual awakening, maybe you can talk about like how you put that into, words and how writing is actually kind of like aiding in that healing. Like it's going back and forth.
Well, I will say that, my actual spiritual awakening, it started when I was in my 20s. And I started doing what a lot of people do. They'll do deep dives into conspiracy theories. But I was also learning about sacred geometry and astrotheology and, um, the original families. I was heavily into a man named Michael Tessarian, and his work was introduced to me by an ex-boyfriend of mine, and it was kind of like this journey that we started together. So I'm very thankful, for nothing else from that relationship. It helped me to awaken to a lot of things, um, and to realize that we have been very very programmed to think very less of ourselves and what we're actually capable of and what we even really are to begin with. And so I will say that writing is a very powerful tool. It's something that I'm very grateful that was introduced to me at a very early age. My mother gave me my first journal when I was about 7, 8 years old, and it was a birthday gift. And ever since then, I have basically kept a journal off and on throughout my entire life. So I do have a written record of my life, which is a wonderful thing to have. Um, And it's something that when I'm working with people, whether it was the students that I was working with when I was a social worker, or even now as a life coach, or when I was a teacher, because I did spend 4 years as an adjunct English instructor at a local community college in New Jersey, which I absolutely adored doing that as well. And what I would find is that I always found a way to incorporate journaling, into whatever the case may be, whether it be an assignment, whether it be something to help a client work through whatever issue they were going through at the moment. Journaling in and of itself can be very powerful. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the straightforward you writing about like, oh, dear diary, this is what happened today.
Hmm.
Like if that's the mood that you're in, then go with that. But journaling can be very fun. You can do a whole bunch of different prompts. Um, And you can also use it to manifest. And using journaling prompts and scripting to manifest is something that I pride myself on. My friend who's also a life coach, she calls me a master manifester because of the things that I've been able to manifest in my life in a very short span of time. And she knows that I don't buy into time being real. I call it an illusion. I call it an illusion because it really truly is. And one of the things that I love to do is scripting and doing and doing like the 555 method. For people that don't know what the 555 method is, it's basically writing either a certain word or a sentence or a phrase that you want to manifest and bring into your reality, or should I say, align and match and sync up with that particular reality. And you write it out 55 times in a row for 5 days straight. And so doing the 5 by 55 method is something that I have utilized myself, and it does work. It really does work. And the beauty of it is, even if you go into the exercise not truly believing that it's going to work, just from the repetition of writing it and thinking about it and even speaking it, you actually over time do train your brain and your mind to start believing whatever it is you're writing, and eventually you're going to align with that reality and it's going to come about.
I
um,
like mind over matter.
it,
If you put that effort in, and I've talked to other life coaches that have talked in a similar vein in terms of like the reprogramming of your mindset. It's kind of
yes.
like if you're an athlete, you practice that 3 point shot. If you're a
Hmm.
musician, you practice like your piano. Because through repetition, it's like the same effort. Like if you put that repetition in, it kind of puts that frame in your mind. Like yeah, you have to put these. So you have to train your mind the same way you train your fingers on the piano, right? The same way somebody practices their lines as an actor. If
Hmm.
you don't practice, it's not going to happen. You're not going to have self actualize unless you put the mindset in there. Otherwise, things are just going to be laid upon you because you don't have like a strategy. You don't have it in your head to like have a way to a path forward, right?
And actually, I was going to say for my second book, which I have right here, just because half of it is doing what I call grunt work, and the second half is the light work. So it's called From Grunt Work to Light Work, a homeowner's guide to attracting buyers. And this is what it looks like. And it is available on Amazon.
Mm.
And what I love about this book, and I haven't spoken about it as much as I have my first book, um, I guess playing favorites with my book, but this book has a lot of helpful information in it because I can honestly say it worked for me, and I am a believer that, what works for one person might not work for someone else, which is true. However, if someone is willing to give the methods that I talk about and the tips that I give in this book a chance, I think they would find that it will be useful for them. So, what I did with this particular book, which I really do love, is that the first half of the book, is literally about doing the grunt work. So, I just sold my house in New Jersey before I moved here to Boston, and I did the same steps that I did back in 2019 when I sold my house in a relatively short span of time as well. And I talked about getting your house organized, clearing out the clutter, making it presentable for people when they're coming in to do tours, uh, fixing things that you can fix if you're able to afford it, just sprucing it up as much as possible before you actually put it on the market. And then the second half of the book, which I call the light work, talks about manifesting your ideal buyer. So the tips that I give for that is the 5 by 55 method, as well as scripting. Affirmations are some of my favorites because I'm a firm believer that all of our thoughts and everything that we talk about are basically affirmations, the way that we see ourselves, what we speak into existence, constantly leaning on having a more positive outlook as a more instead of a more negative outlook all of that influences our reality in the world that we live in, because even though we're a collective and we're deeply connected energetically, like there is no separation between us as a collective, even though we have forgotten that. Um, when you look on the brighter side of things and you're more positive and upbeat, you notice that you start attracting more positive things. What you put out, you also receive back. So I find that the tips that I put in this book are very helpful for people. I also incorporate using astrology and the transits that are going on at the time, because I am an astrologer as well, and just some really helpful tips for people. And I gave space in the book for journaling and doing the prompts as well. So yeah, very helpful, very helpful.
So you recommend like journaling that's like written journaling versus like voice memo journaling?
You know what? I believe that both are powerful. Both are powerful. I believe that our words that we speak are powerful as well as the words that we write. So I would encourage people to do both if they're able to.
Hmm. But it's
Absolutely.
interesting, like if you do the written journaling, then you can go back and look at like what you've written
Hmm.
and
You
and be
absolutely
able to
can.
do that kind of a self-analysis. I mean, you do the same thing if you go back and listen to your thing. I think something about the written word, I don't know if there's proof, but it seems to like really stick in your head in terms of the reprogramming. It seems to me.
Hmm.
Uh,
It
have,
does. And
have,
I feel like, especially for the both of us, since we grew up going to school at a time where there weren't many electronics in school at all, and we
mhm.
were doing everything by hand, including taking notes instead of recording the notes that the teacher was saying. Um, I just feel like by going through the motion and putting that energy into actually writing out whatever it is that I'm attempting to manifest, or even just writing out what happened to me today, like in a script or journaling, I feel like you're giving more power and energy into it. I mean, you're still giving power and energy into it when you speak it, because whatever you speak um, becomes your reality, basically. So
Mhm.
I find that there's space and there's validity in doing both. Absolutely.
But prompting and scripting, that's really interesting. Words for what you're doing to actually reprogram your mind or put you in that mind frame. Maybe you can talk about like how you approach prompting and scripting.
Well, I think for me, it was something that I didn't even realize that I was doing, because I'm one of those people. I'm a Virgo rising, and I've been studying my chart now basically my entire life. I had a mother who she's now gone, but or crossed over, as I say. She's in the higher realms. She started taking me to a woman who was a psychic medium at the age of 10. So I started becoming much more self-aware thanks to this woman. Her name was Penny. And what I found out is that, some people who tend to have Virgo prominent in their chart, we tend to be very self-aware, sometimes self-critical. There's the tendency for perfectionism in there as well. And I noticed just by going over my old journaling, like journaling entries throughout the years, that what I was writing about, a lot of times I was manifesting and not even realizing it. Like the things that I would write about, like, oh, I wish this would happen. And, like I would put like all my energy into like just like wanting this certain thing to happen. And then I would go back and be like, oh my God, like I actually manifested that just from journaling about it and I didn't realize it. So the beauty of, where we are now in our collective and our awakening is that we're becoming conscious manifestors instead of doing it by default, which is what a
Your
lot of people
unconscious.
do anyway.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
constantly manifesting like every single day. A lot of us just didn't even realize it.
Yeah.
So becoming aware of what your thoughts are, and even your vibration, because it really is all about vibration. If you're trying to align with something that's like really great, like say like having a higher income or meeting the love of your life or just starting this business, whatever the case may be, you have to be in, you have to, it's important to trust and believe that it's even possible, number one. And number two, to be in an energetic alignment with it. Because a lot of these things that you want to align with that are all that are possible for you, if you're kind of like in this low frequency, but you want these like really fantastic things to happen for you, you need to start working on doing the inner work and the shadow work to raise your vibration and figure out why you might not believe that it's necessarily possible for you. And it's kind of like a catch 22 because I'm a firm believer that if you get this desire, like for something that you want to happen, like laced on your heart, that already tells you right there that it's a possibility. Like you wouldn't get, I believe you wouldn't get an idea to do something if it wasn't already possible, like in a
Yeah.
different timeline or parallel universe. It's whatever phrase you want to use. And so when it comes to journaling, I try to tailor whatever it is that I'm working on in that particular moment to the thing that I want. So if I find that, like for instance, what I just did over the past 4 months, I basically manifested a completely different life for myself.
Hmm.
I knew 2 years ago that I was going to be living in Massachusetts. How did I know? Well, not to take up too much more time with this, but I was in a relationship with someone who I had known for years, but I also knew that it just wasn't working out. And my soul was literally crying for this relationship to end, even though I was in such a low place, like self-esteem wise and self-concept wise, that I just didn't have the heart to end it myself and leave. And that's been a reoccurring theme because of things that happened to me when I was younger. My relationship with my father, it wasn't the best. He was one of those men that was in and out of my life, wasn't really there for myself or my mother. So that ended up playing out in my relationships with it tends
Hmm.
to happen to people. It really does. So in 2022, when my now ex-boyfriend came to me and basically ended things right at the Capricorn full moon, I remember because we're both Capricorns, and I'm into astrology. I was part devastated, but us also part relieved. It was one of those situations, but we were living together and we had lived together for 3 years. So I decided to have what they call a cord cutting ceremony. Like we all have these energetic cords to people in our lives, whether it be our pets, our children, friends, even coworkers to a certain extent. People that you don't necessarily like, you can have energetic cords with them as well. And so I had a cord cutting ceremony done by a woman. I love her business, and she's also an astrologer as well. She was offering them free for her viewers, and this was right around the Aquarius full moon in 2022. And she ended up doing the ceremony on what would have been me and my ex's 6 year anniversary. Coincidence? I don't believe in them. So the night that she did them, I felt it in my sleep and I had a dream. I felt the cord being severed and I had a dream, which I don't believe that dreams are just dreams either, but that's a whole nother conversation. And this very attractive man walks through this door and walks over to me and hugs me so tightly that I felt it in my sleep and I woke up. And I was like, what the hell was that? Like, I had
Hmm.
no idea what that was. I've had prophetic dreams before, I have visions very easily. Um, and I had never experienced a dream that intense before. So I started doing research and everything. And soulmates started coming up, which I already firmly believe in them. And this term twin flame started coming up. And I'm like, what the hell is a twin flame? So I started doing research. And long story short, all the signs and synchronicities of what I was experiencing, not just from that dream, but things that started happening after the dream, the visions, the interactions, the telepathy, all of that stuff, it aligned with what people on social media we're calling the twin flame journey, which the concept has been around since really the beginning of time. And basically it's, you have one soul that's split up in two separate bodies. there's soul mates, but you can have multiple soulmates in your life. They can be your parents, they can be your spouse, they can be your friend. Um, they can be a lot of things, pets as well. And when it comes to twin flames, they're supposed to be like one soul. I'm in my body, mine is in my counterpart, divine counterpart, he's in his. And you can also have same sex twin flames as well. Um, because masculine and feminine energy, male and females have those. So it's not like gender specific. So that's what I found out that I was on. And ever since then, my life has been kind of a roller coaster. I went through the dark night of the soul, as a lot of people go through, where you just start doing all this inner work, this shadow work, this healing and this purging and reviewing trauma and all of that stuff. And it could be quite painful at times. So the way that I started doing it, oh, and I also had this moment where this higher self of mine basically said very loudly in my ear, "How would you feel about living in Boston?" And I heard it clear as day, and I jumped because it was so loud. It sounded like someone was standing next to me, and I was outside. I was like looking around, like, what? So, yeah, that was what triggered me getting my mind together about the possibility of moving to Massachusetts. And I fought it for a long time. I really did. And the way that I started getting like all these, some people call them downloads, I call them visions. I started seeing myself like living like a different life in Massachusetts. And it wasn't just I was seeing them, I was feeling whatever was going on in the visions. Like it was happening in real time, which technically I firmly believe it was. We live in a multiverse where there's infinite possibilities, limitless possibilities. So what I was receiving, it really is, a reality that's unfolding for me now, but I had to get myself together before making that leap. So between, I would say, autumn of 2022, I went into Reiki healing, which my Reiki healer, her name was Connie. We went through a lot together, and she was very proud of the work that I did, like energetically, all the things that I've overcome and dealt with, all the healing that I've done. And when I finally made the decision earlier this year, fast forward to May of 2024, by then I had done like so much shadow work. Scripting was one of them. Affirmations, very heavy on my affirmations. I not only write them out at times, I will text them to myself on my cell phone, so I always have them with me.
Mm.
But I also record them. I'll send voice memos to myself and I'll save them so I can also listen to them. I can recite them as well, but I can also listen to them. And when I made the decision to finally take this leap of faith, because I knew that eventually I was going to be leaving New Jersey anyway, because I wasn't happy in New Jersey. I knew that my life, it had felt like it was a rerun, basically, of the same
Hmm.
story being
Same
played
cycle
over
all
and
the
over
time
again.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just not going anywhere. And I knew it was because I wasn't meant to be in New Jersey anymore. And I kind of knew that after my mother passed away. I know I'm jumping around a lot, but I've had a lot happen in a short period of time. She passed away unexpectedly in Thanksgiving weekend of 2016. And so, I had always said that like if she wasn't here and I wouldn't have a reason to stay in New Jersey. And when my relationship ended, I really didn't have a reason to stay in New Jersey. So fast forward to May of this year, I made the decision to pull the trigger. I reached out to my real estate agent, the one that helped me find the house that I moved into when I left my ex. When I finally left my ex's house. And I was like, all right. I was like, I'm doing it. I was like, I'm finally moving to Boston. He was like, oh my gosh. He was like, you're doing it. I was like, yeah. So I knew, I kept saying and I kept putting it out there, this house is going to sell fast. This house is going to sell fast. House went on the market May 14th. I had my buyer and multiple offers by that Friday, and I didn't even
That's
realize
fast.
it. Yes,
That's
that's
very,
very fast.
that's very fast.
It's very fast, and it was all about timing too, because I looked at the market to see what was comparable, like in my area, and we priced it right. Me and Kendrick, that was my realtor's name. We priced it right because he asked me, well, what are you thinking? And I told him, and it was in the range
In
that
the
he was
ballpark,
thinking
yeah.
of as well. So what we did was we went low, and people started going above it and above it and above it. So I ended up having like five really solid offers within a few days. And I also had, within 6 days, I had over 20 showings of my house.
Wow.
And
A
that
lot.
was exhausting. I was very fortunate and I was grateful, but it was exhausting because every time we used Showing Time, this app called Showing Time, where the
Hmm.
seller can like, schedule and tell the people when they can come in. And you're basically doing what the realtor would do. But I knew it would be faster if I did it because I work from home. So, and
Yeah.
we had used Showing Time before, me and my previous realtor, Terry. Um, we were like blown away and like just so happy. So it went on the market late Tuesday, the 14th. By that Monday, we ended offers and closed them down. And I had an offer that I accepted like the next day. So
So you're on
yeah,
your way
so
to Boston then.
yeah, so and just from me knowing it in my heart, like, you know, affirmations are great. Your frequency is great. Speaking it is great. But I also just had this unshakable and unbreakable knowing that it was just going to work out, that that's what I was being guided to do. And I listened. I listened to my higher self, even though there had been so many doubts, so many doubts along the way. Um, I definitely want to write a series about my life over the past two
Mhm.
years and what I've gone through because it's been a very interesting and never dull to say the least. But incorporating journaling, I was writing down the visions that I was receiving adamantly. I was also scripting on a somewhat regular basis. I say somewhat because sometimes I would miss days. I wasn't doing it every single day, but weekly. And also affirmations. Like I was heavy into my affirmations over the past 2 years to get to the point of where I felt comfortable and ready to take that leap of faith. And so I would say, all of those things combined is what led me to being able to manifest moving from going from selling my house, placing it on the market on May 14th, and then actually moving into my new unit in Boston on September 14th. So yeah,
Wow. It's like,
it was,
oh, the law of attraction kind of brings things to you, like
it
it brings
does,
people, but also brings like you to a new environment. Like, because
it does.
if you're in a bad vibration environment, it's like frequencies are like you're like it's discordant. It's not working, right? If you get to an environment that's more welcoming, that you're more aligned to, and you were feeling that Boston was going to give you better alignment, right?
Oh, put it this way, every vision that I had of myself, either in Boston or the surrounding, suburban area, it was never anything negative. Like hands down, like it was never anything negative, which was interesting. Like it gave very much like too good to be true, which is
Hmm.
why doubts, that was one
Yeah,
of the reasons why so many doubts and everything popped up
too
over the
good. It
past
can't
two
be true.
years. Because it's like this doesn't seem real. Like, but then, my higher self, spirit team, even my twin flame energetically was like, you just have to trust this. Like, you just have to trust this. And to tell someone who's lived in New Jersey for 42 years that they just have to trust this, it's like,
Yeah, yeah. Well, you were there most of your life. You're in a totally different place.
exactly. Like, the only time I had ever lived out of state was in 2000. I spent a semester at LaSalle University in North Philadelphia, which I had an interesting time there to say the least. And I still keep in touch with some of the people, some of the friends that I met in my dorm. But no, I had spent most of my life in New Jersey. So to take this leap of faith, it took a lot of trust and a lot of faith. And yes, I definitely utilized writing, and not just the journaling as well. Like when I was the time that between the time of my relationship ending and me basically doing the work and taking the necessary steps, both internally and externally, to move to Boston, I actually wrote the majority of the books that I have on the market. And I still
Mhm.
don't know how I did that, considering how much I had going on in my life. But yeah, I wrote several nonfiction children's books for the school library market in 2022 and 2023. Actually, not so much in 2023 because I kind of took a break after a while.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, just writing in and of itself was very cathartic, and being able to pour my creativity into that was very therapeutic. I actually released an ebook called Picked Up the Pen, Put Down the Phone, Picked Up the Pen, how I wrote 10 books in 4 years, which is true because that
That's
was
your
book
latest
number
book.
11.
That's the latest book.
Yes, yes, and it's only in ebook form, but it's very short and it's very concise. And I basically give tips on how I did it, and I'm not going to say that, my journey is specific and unique to me. This is the life that I've created and manifested for myself, but that doesn't mean that what I've done can't be useful to someone
Oh yeah.
else.
Well, yeah, you bring it forward, like you pay it forward. Like I think the lessons learned in life, why people become like mentors and teachers and coaches is like they can take the things, they can process the things that happen and then be able to tell a story that's going to actually, you know, inspire other people or engage other people because they find some similarity. They find some connection. They find it's like, hey, I felt that. I've seen that. I've heard about that. And then you kind of you reinforce this feeling that people don't want to be by themselves in their feelings, right? They want to know that other people have experienced like the same thing. And if you tell your story, you may not know it, but once it gets out there in the world, people people connect with it.
Absolutely do. And that's one of the reasons why I love just being of service to people, and to go back to the whole Virgo thing, Virgo is the sign of service. And I can honestly say that throughout my career, even when I was doing retail back as a teenager, I just genuinely like helping people. Like that's just my thing. That's what I came here. That's part of what my journey in this lifetime has been about, is just helping people. So I try to help them no matter what I'm doing, whether I'm speaking, whether I'm writing, whether I'm doing a session with them, or just telling them my life story and hoping that it can somehow, you know, help them to raise themselves up from whatever
Raise
mood.
frequency. Like you were saying, like if you're kind of in a low frequency, then you can't get out of some cycles. Like some people get into repetitive cycles, or they get into the um
Yes,
same old, like they're like, oh, I'm phoning it in. Like like if you're in the job and it's like, well, I'm phoning it, it's not exciting.
yes.
Then
And
it's
I've
like,
been
oh,
there.
maybe I don't need to be here anymore.
Exactly. And that I'm telling you, like that's what it started to get to that point. That's how I knew that it really was time to leave social work altogether. Which is, and it sucked because I really enjoyed doing that, but transitioning into being a life coach, I get to use the same skills
Same stuff.
that I implemented into my job as
Next phase. You
a
just
social worker. Yeah.
evolved into the next phase. I mean, what you're doing is the same things, but you're doing it like now you're a coach and you're running your own business, where instead of probably being part of a structure. Not that structure might be useful for help certain people, but now you can help a different set of people. And
And you know what? That's the beauty of life coaching, because there's no limits to it either. You know what I mean? Like there are, you can do partnerships with companies. You can absolutely do partnerships with places that offer mental health services, but you can do
mm,
it from a different perspective,
yeah,
in a different
you're like a
lens.
consultant. Yeah, like you're running. It's like
Yes.
you can decide. Like if you're an employee in a structure, like you're limited by the structure. But
Yes.
once you become like an entrepreneur, like if you're into coaching, if you're into doing it, it's more entrepreneurial. You have more choices in terms of directional shifts and changes that you can, in partnerships, like you're saying, you can decide like, hey, I want to work with this organization. I want to work with this company. I want to work with this person. So you have more
Absolutely.
say in what you're
And
doing, right?
exactly. And it's fun. It really is fun. And I enjoy what I do very, very much. And I'm not saying that like all day, every day is like I'm floating on air and there
Yeah,
there
every day
isn't
is like
work
a
to do.
wave.
Yeah, but because sometimes when you're working with people, depending on what situation they have going through, it can feel a little sad, and as much as you're not doing therapy, you're not doing counseling, but you're still helping somebody when they could be going through a very traumatic or
Yeah, yeah.
chaotic phase in their life. So,
You're draining of
it
your psyche or your
it
soul. I mean,
can be. It
yeah,
can be. So, the thing about life coaching is that when you're screening potential clients to work with, I think, because again, I love speaking things out into my reality and my multiverse, I put out there that I want to work with people who are ready to do the work. Because some
hmm
people, they
oh,
want
yeah,
to
not ready.
hire a life coach, but they expect that person to do all the work for them. And that's not how life coaching works.
Well, life doesn't work that
Not at all.
way.
No, and you can't expect somebody to do all the work for you. Like you have to do it yourself, but you can make it enjoyable. Healing in and of itself, it can be painful, it can be draining, but it doesn't necessarily have to not be fun either.
hmm
You can incorporate certain things into your life when you're going through a healing journey. Absolutely. Laughter is one of my favorite things to do. I love to laugh. And
Yeah,
I try to make sure that I laugh like every single day because if you don't, I find that if I've gone through a whole day and I haven't really had a good laugh, I kind of feel like something's missing. And it's a great way to raise your vibration aside from listening to music or doing breath work. Those are
but
like
it's like the
really
idea
great
of being
ways.
an upbeat life coach is like, you don't have to be on the downward spiral. I mean, a lot of things, some things can be very melancholy,
They
but
can.
like the process in life, like if you can bring, this is what happens. Like, people like humor, people like
They do.
comedians, right? But comedians can actually weave tragedy into their skit, right? But they find a way to bring the comedy in there. So it's kind of a balance. It's like, but if you're just in always on the dark side or always on the melancholy side, it's a little too heavy. Like if you can
Mhm.
bring some balance, right? It like upbeat. I like the idea, like you mentioned, like upbeat life coach. And I was like, wow, that's
Yes.
the first time I ever heard anybody say that. So
Well,
I was like,
that's
that's
wonderful to hear. I'm glad.
because a
I'm
lot of
glad
times,
because
yeah,
no, I was just going to say that like I'm working with a wonderful business partner right now, and he asked me, for when he's trying to connect me. He's marketing, but he also has other businesses that he works with. He's a multifaceted man, and so he's like, if I have prospective clients for you, what do you want me to tell people that like you're really good at? And I'm like, well, I'm one of those people. I'm a Jackie of all trades, so I'm really good at a lot of different things. But I was like, when it comes to life coaching or being even a consultant, because I love consulting people when it comes to being a writer and an author and helping them to like take that leap forward and like pull the trigger and move forward with that. I would say I have a knack for putting people at ease. I'm one of those people where people have naturally gravitated towards me and told me their life story within like seconds of meeting me. And that's something that's always happened for me. I guess it's just the energy and the vibration that I give off that just helps people feel comfortable. And so I take pride in that because I am a very naturally happy, bubbly type of person. So,
we're empathetic. Like if you're empathetic and you make people feel at ease, then they're not going to have hesitation about telling you their story or hesitation
okay.
about diving deeper when they need to. So, like the people with like law of attraction to come to you, like they're ready to talk to you because they picked up on your vibe and they know, like, well, this is going to be okay.
And don't get me wrong, it's not like I don't know how to like balance things out. And like you said, you have to find that balance because certain things that people are talking about, I worked in darkest, I can say the darkest job that I ever had as a social worker was working in child protective services.
Mm,
And that in and of itself was the job. It was a turning point for me. And while I'm grateful and proud of the work that I did, because I always treated my clients with respect. That's what made me stand out amongst certain people that I worked with. Not even necessarily other case managers, but management. I was always very respectful when I went into people's homes. I always asked permission to like look in their cupboards or their refrigerator, stuff like that, because a lot of other people walked in there with ego and feeling like they were entitled. And I'm like,
mm,
I don't care what the allegations are towards this parent. You always treat them with a level of respect, no matter how difficult it can be, because some allegations were gross. I mean, I'm just being honest,
mhm.
especially if it came to sexual assault, that's a very touchy subject in and of itself. So yeah, I had to walk a fine line from between it, but I feel like I had a knack for putting especially the children that I was working with at ease. I love working with children and
Mhm.
adolescents.
Well, it's
Just
good
to
to have that rapport, to be able to
yeah.
have a rapport. And also, like what you mentioned, respect, because a lot of times today, like there's a lot of like disrespect for like, everybody. It's like for like,
The
between
cancel
sexes,
culture.
between cultures, between ethnicity, from like everybody's got like everybody's like, oh, I'm always right. There's no like understanding. There's a lot of conflict going on. Everything's like
Well,
black and white. There's no grays. Where's that? Like people don't know how to
I
talk to each other.
I will say that I was a very shy introvert person before I started working on my self concept. And throughout the years, I did plays. I studied drama when I was doing English at college and even in high school. And putting myself out there, even on social media, is something that has helped me. And throughout my spiritual journey and doing the shadow work, you know, I know that most of us have lived hundreds, if not thousands, of lives here on Earth. This is not my first go around here on Earth.
Mhm,
And for most people, it's just that we go through that amnesia throughout lifetimes. And you tend to forget what you did like a couple lifetimes ago, and things that have been revealed to me. It has definitely humbled me because it told me to stop being so judgmental. As a culture, as a collective, we've been programmed and trained to be so judgmental about everybody. And the one thing that I learned is that the things that I did in past lifetimes that I would never do in this lifetime, it made me cringe. It made me
mhm,
cringe because I didn't necessarily remember doing those things. I was less of an evolved spirit back then, but I still did them anyway. And so I say that because I've put out in multiple videos on my TikTok account that what's going on now in the media with people pointing fingers at this person and people pointing fingers at that person, not just one particular celebrity or politician, but just in general, the judgment that's going
mm,
on right now. I'm not saying that the actions that these people have done, they shouldn't be held accountable for that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if people really remembered what they did in their past lives, or even took a hard look at themselves in this life, just being
yeah,
honest, they wouldn't be so quick to judge
other people.
somebody
Yeah,
else.
yeah. Well,
Not at
there's
all.
some things that have been said about like not judging. Like people go
Yes.
back, and look at like if you don't like everybody's got something, because of your
Mhm.
past lives or something in this life, like you said, and everybody's
Yes.
living a perfect life. Like most
Like,
people are not. We're human
no,
beings,
no.
so we're
And
always.
yeah, I was going to say, and we're at a phase right now in humanity's evolution where we're not only remembering just how powerful we are. I call ourselves gods and goddesses because basically, if you're going to be of the mind that we have this higher power, this infinite source, that we're made in his and hers image, well, then why wouldn't you consider yourself to be a god or goddess with the same abilities and the same capabilities? That doesn't make any sense. To me, it doesn't make any sense. So I'm just, I'm one of those people who has been putting out content that we should just be less judgmental, and not only of other people but of ourselves, because
Yeah,
a lot of times when
starts there.
we yeah, a lot of times when we're being very judgmental on other people, it's really just a reflection of things that we've done to
Yeah, we kind
ourselves.
of project,
Yeah, that we
the
haven't
weaknesses we have of our own, we project on
yeah,
other people, you know?
exactly. So that's something I've been working on myself, because as a woman of color, and as a female in general, I can I'm going by how this life has unfolded for me and the programming I have endured. And women in general are endured or programmed to not only endure and be strong and, keep going, but to also be judgmental of other females, to be critical of ourselves and other
Mhm.
females, to be very competitive with other females. It's like just so much division that gets
Yeah, should
drilled
be more
into
unity,
us.
well, more connection,
Yeah.
because but yeah, I think that's a great place maybe to leave it today, but
Yeah.
we always go over our time,
Oh
but
no, no worries. Yeah.
I wanted to thank you again for being on the show, but we do have your link there, which is a little
Okay.
long, but what I would like to tell people is like if you go to that URL within the podcast description, that will be fully clickable. So if somebody clicks there, I'm assuming they'll see all your books and all your services are all there.
They will, absolutely. And the business is called Mystical Fire Ascension Life Coaching. So if they even just Google that name or me, if you Google Tamika M. Murray, I have gotten the algorithm to really love me over the
Oh,
past
good.
few
That's
years,
good.
so that if you Google Tamika M. Murray, I'm usually the main one that will pop up. I've done it several times and had other people do it too. So you'll usually see me
Well, we do encourage
scroll.
people to click on that link. It will be clickable. We were just live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and it will be clickable within the podcast description on those places, and we'll be on all the other podcast platforms where you can listen to or watch a podcast. By later today, I want to thank you again for being a guest on the Family Like to Ghost podcast, and I encourage people to check out your books that we've discussed. You have 11 books. I'm sure you have some more books you'll be putting out, and
Yes,
congratulations on moving to Boston. Boston's pretty cool. I
it
worked in
is.
Boston for many years, but thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.